It was late. The subway car rattled unevenly through the tunnels, its fluorescent lights flickering overhead, casting a sickly yellow glow on the worn-out seats and the tired faces of the few remaining passengers. Aaron slouched in his seat, headphones on, lost in thought, or at least trying to be. The day had been long, a never-ending cascade of cubicle chatter, phone calls, and emails that felt like they went nowhere. All he wanted now was to get home, heat up the leftovers he'd been too tired to finish the night before, and maybe start watching that new show everyone kept recommending. But then, out of nowhere, the atmosphere in the subway car shifted. Voices, loud and sharp, cut through Aaron's music, tearing at his concentration. He pulled out an earbud, furrowing his brow. Two men were standing a few seats down. One was tall, broad-shouldered, and scruffy, with a black leather jacket that looked like it had seen better days. The other, shorter and wiry, had a tattered hoodie and a face that looked like it had been worn down by life, eyes darting nervously as he backed away from the taller man. Their postures were rigid, their voices rising in an escalating confrontation. The passengers around them glanced nervously at each other, some staring, others pretending not to notice. A few shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but not Aaron. His curiosity, and his instinct to understand what might go wrong, compelled him to steal glances trying to figure out what was happening. The taller man's voice was deep and forceful, booming with aggression, while the smaller one's was high-pitched, almost pleading. It didn't take long for the shouting to escalate into shoving. The smaller man stumbled back against the pole, clutching his side, and Aaron's stomach tightened. He wasn't far away, close enough to feel the heat of the tension in the air, but not close enough to understand what had caused it. A few passengers subtly moved to other seats, not wanting to get involved. But not Aaron. He stayed rooted in place, frozen in that uncomfortable mix of anxiety and indecision that made him feel both helpless and guilty. Then it happened, the sound of a fist connecting with someone's jaw, a sickening crack that made Aaron's stomach churn. The smaller man stumbled backward, his hands flying up to protect his face, while the bigger one advanced, eyes blazing with fury. Instinctively, Aaron stood. He didn't have time to think. His legs just moved on their own. What had compelled him? He didn't know. Maybe it was the fear that things would get worse, maybe the guilt of knowing he could do something and choosing not to. But there was something else, a need to stop it before it went any further. "Hey!" Aaron shouted louder than he meant to. His voice cracked slightly, but it carried enough weight to make the larger man hesitate, his gaze snapping to Aaron. The car seemed to hold its breath, the noise of the train and the tracks beneath them the only sound in the sudden, eerie silence. Aaron didn't know what he was doing. He didn't know what to say next. All he knew was that he couldn't let this happen, couldn't let someone get hurt. Certainly not like this, not in his subway. Just, don't do this. "It's not worth it, man," he said, his palms raised in a half-hearted attempt to physically halt the fight with words alone. His voice trembled slightly, but there was a strength behind it. The larger man scoffed, a derisive sound that made the smaller man flinch. He turned back toward his original target, his body language still full of anger, ready to strike again. Aaron's pulse spiked. The fear in the smaller man's eyes was unmistakable, and for a moment he imagined himself in his place, caught between a predator and an escape that might never come. And that's when Aaron did what felt both brave and incredibly stupid. He stepped directly between them, his heart hammering in his chest. He was now within inches of the confrontation, close enough to feel the heat of the anger radiating off the larger man. "Enough," Aaron said, his voice louder, almost angry now, as though he was trying to force the words to carry weight. "Whatever this is, it's over. It stops here." There was a long moment, an agonizing stretch of time, where Aaron wasn't sure what would happen next. He braced himself for impact, his mind racing with the fear that the larger man might lash out at him. But then, slowly, almost begrudgingly, the bigger guy stepped back. He muttered something under his breath, his glare lingering for a second longer, then stormed down the aisle toward the next car. Aaron's shoulders slumped with relief. The smaller man, shaking but visibly grateful, nodded at him, his face pale but softening. Aaron returned to his seat, his heart still pounding, the adrenaline still buzzing in his ears. He felt the world around him begin to move again, the mundane rhythm of the subway returning to its usual monotony, but inside, everything felt different. As the subway continued its journey, Aaron couldn't help but reflect on what had just happened. He wasn't sure if he would have done it again, or if he had even made the right choice. Was it courage? Was it foolishness? He didn't know. But as he stared at his reflection in the subway window, the flickering lights catching the weariness in his own eyes, he realized something about himself. Sometimes doing something, anything, is better than sitting in silence, letting things unfold without intervention.